Is my voice audible for everyone? You can message me in the chat box if you are able to hear my voice. Is my voice audible for everyone?
Yeah.
We'll wait for, we'll wait for 5 more minutes. We'll begin the session in next 2 minutes. We'll wait for others to join. Hi, everyone. So we'll begin with the session. I'll just wait for 1 more minute. Till then, I'll explain you the way in which we'll be dealing with the session. Uh, I'll just request everyone to go on mute. In between, if anyone has any doubt, you can ask me in the chat box, which is there on your screen. Shall we begin? If everyone is fine with it. If I get more yes, then I'll begin with it.
Okay, sir.
So we'll divide this session uh, basically three parts. The first part, I'll be dealing with the idea that how law is important for you forensic experts. So I'll call you forensic experts because you will be graduating as forensic science, as I've been told, as forensic science students you are right now. You'll be graduating as forensic science students soon. So I'll be addressing you as forensic science experts. Importance of law for you all. We'll start with that part. Second, we'll be dealing with how law can be chosen as a career after forensic science, as I have done. I have completed my BSc in forensic science from Mumbai Institute of Forensics. And then after that, I completed my law from Institute of the ILS Law College in Pune. So I'll be also dealing with that part, that how law can be chosen as a career after forensics. And in the end, we'll be having a question and answer session. So that's how we'll be dividing our session into 3 parts. So let's begin. So as when I take lectures in Institute of Forensics Mumbai, I always start with some anecdotes or stories. So I'll take the opportunity to again start with a story for you all to make a start interesting. So the story is of truth, lie, and deceit. These three were existing at some point of time where deceit and lie went to meet truth. They asked truth that you should come outside, see the world which is there, which is so beautiful. The world outside is beautiful. The truth felt that, okay, these people are lie and deceit. So should I believe them? So the truth just peeped outside the window and he saw, yeah, there's actually the world which is there outside is actually beautiful. He went outside. After that, lie and deceit told him that if you walk here from 5 minutes, there is a lake in front of in front of these woods. So truth again said that, okay, I'll walk behind you because I know that you both are lie and deceit. When they walked for 5 minutes, they in fact found that yes, there is a beautiful lake. After that, lie and deceit told him to just touch the water because it's a very warm and not very cold also for you to, you can take bath, you can enter the water. Believing that truth just touched the water, he said that yes, it's actually something which I can enjoy taking bath into. He entered into the water, he removed his clothes, and taking this opportunity, lie and deceit grabbed his clothes and they ran away. What happened after that is that today, when you see around you, it's always the lie and deceit which is wearing the clothes of truth. So whatever you see around, it's not always truth. It might be lie and deceit which is wearing the clothes of truth. So what is your job as forensic experts is to find the truth which is existing, which is probably lying somewhere. It's probably hiding because it's a naked truth. So you have to find that truth. You have to ask him to come in front of everything. You have to bring it in front of the court of law. And that's your job as the forensic experts. So with that note, let's begin with our session. I'll not definitely, I definitely know that you all being the forensic science students, you all know, you must have been told in your first years, probably those who are in your MSc, you must have been already heard this terms many a times, that what is the origin of the term forensic. And I'm definitely not willing to tell you what it actually means, but I just want you to remind it, that you all should remind yourself what forensic as a term, how you are going to apply it. So let's begin with this fact. Forensic, as you all know, is derived from the word forensis, and which means a forum or a court of law. Now, why I'm repeating this for you all is to know that forensic science is not like any other science. So in all other science, you must have heard the definition that science is having knowledge or study of the physical world which is there around you. However, when it comes to forensic science, it's not that science which is just studies the world which is there around you. What forensic science does actually for you all is that it analyzes something. You know the principle of analysis. If you know the principles of forensic science, the major principle is forensics analysis principle. So you analyze something, but your ultimate role is to use it for that forensis, that forum. Unless and until your science is of some help to the forum, there's no use of forensic science. That's why it's not science, it's forensics which aids the court of law. Now let's go ahead with the next word, because I have named this session as forensic science and jurisprudence. So let's understand what is jurisprudence. Now juris means law. You must have heard of this thing. Prudentia, prudence, means the understanding of law. So jurisprudence is the understanding of the law, and forensic science is the science which aids the court of law. So that's why these two terms becomes very important for a forensic scientist who is actually not working for the purpose of development of science per se. He's actually working for the purpose of aiding the court systems, the court of law. So let's take the idea of the definition of forensic science itself. It probably it will be a kind of, you'll have to again go back in your first year, those who are in your last year. The forensic science is defined as that scientific discipline. If there is any disturbance in between, you all can message me in between. So if there is any problem, the forensic science is defined as scientific discipline which is directed to the recognition, identification, individualization, and evaluation of physical evidence. So here comes the first term, physical evidence, for the purpose of administration of justice. So that's why forensic science, when you define it, is the term which has been derived for the purpose of analyzing physical evidence. Where it aids the administration of the courts. So basically, your understanding, that's why I began with this note that forensic science is not a science, it's something which aids the court of law. So let's see, what exactly are we dealing with? You must have heard of the principle of analysis. You all know that analysis means, the principle of analysis of forensic science basically says that analysis is not better than the sample which is analyzed. Why this principle is so important is because your result of the analysis is not something which is as important as the way in which it will be presented in the court. So sample of the analysis becomes very important. And there's another important principle. I'm not going to deal with all 7 principles of forensic science. I'm very sure that you all know it. So what is the second important principle? Is the law of probability. You all have heard this. Law of probability says that whatever is the analysis which is done in the forensic science laboratory is based on certain probabilities. Now, how can we say that something which is based on probability can decide someone's fate? If you are dealing in a criminal justice system, how can you rely upon probabilities? So the answer to this, you all need to understand the laws, the definitions of certain things. So if you can see the Evidence Act in section 3 of our Indian Evidence Act, it defines the term proved. What is proved? The definition of proved, I'll read for you all, those who do not have Bare Act. Proved says a fact is said to be proved when, after considering the matters before it, the court believes, the word important is the court believes it to exist or considers its existence so probable that a prudent man ought, under the circumstances of the particular case, act upon the supposition that it exists. So there are 2 important things. Court of law believes it to exist. So it's not you scientific experts, not me as an advocate, not me believing it, but the court should believe. So when the court believes that something exists, then it becomes the fact. The second part of the definition said that something which is so probable that court has to believe its existence. So here comes your law of probability of forensic science, that something which creates the probability such that the court itself will believe that the fact exists. So this makes the law of proof, and that's how the forensic evidence is made admissible in the court of law. Now, let's deal with the idea that why the forums are very important for forensic scientists. Because when you take the evidence in the court, you must have heard the principle of Edmund Locard. The Locard principle says that every contact leaves traces. The simplest principle, which we say that is the basis of forensic science, the Locard's principle. However, what you need to understand is that the basis of forensic science, which is based on Locard's principle itself, has to be proven in the court of law. Let me explain why I'm saying this. Now let's take a case that I have to travel from Mumbai to Nagpur. I'm taking a train. I'm particularly sitting in a particular coach. I'm getting a window seat. I'm sitting there. Now, principle of exchange given by Locard says that there will be some exchange of the material where I am sitting. Now, whether this itself can be proven in the court of law? No. So what has to be proven by law? It says that the proof, the definition of proof, the way we read it, where I was sitting in that train, probably my pant had certain fibers which got exchanged with the seat of the train. So the fibers will be the first exchange, the proofs of it. Second, probably I might have touched the window. So my fingerprints will be there on the window. A second part of it. So you'll have to collect the fingerprints for it. You will have to understand that what is the collection, identification, seizure, and then taking it ultimately to the court of law. So this is how the Locard's principle sounds simple, but becomes very important when you prove something in the court of law, because you need to give proof of every single thing. Now, with this, rather than directly going into certain laws which will be important for forensic experts like you, I'll give you why law is very important for the forensic experts. Let me give you certain examples. So, I'll give you one example when I myself was doing forensic science. I was doing BSc, probably I was in my final year. And I used to go to see the courtrooms for the purpose of understanding that how forensic scientists depose in the court of law. So at that time, I probably was lucky for the purpose of seeing that one expert was deposing in the case of DNA sampling, which was done probably by him. What I could understand, I'll tell you all, which exactly explains that why law is very important for why law becomes very important for forensic experts. Now, the expert who had come, it was a very high profile case. A person probably had murdered someone in the room and had left absolutely no evidence. No one had seen him, no eyewitnesses, nothing was there in that room. So what was existing at that time was only one single forensic evidence, which was a hair sample of that accused person. Now, that hair sample, when it was collected, that went for the analysis, everything was done properly. And then when the analysis came out, it found that the accused person's DNA from that hair sample is matching with his actual hair sample, which was collected from him. So which proved a major part that the accused might have been present on the scene of crime, which probably acted as the best evidence for the prosecution. So prosecution story was based upon it. When cross-examiner got up, he asked one question. He said, who opened the sample? The expert said, my peon must have opened it. He probably thought that it doesn't matter at all. After that, the cross-examiner asked him, okay, then the hair sample, which was opened by the peon, was brought into your lab by him. He said, yes. After that, cross-examiner did not cross him on any single point. Why? Is because the analysis doesn't matter unless and until the chain of custody is proved. So when it was not shown that it was the expert who analyzed it, had seen it being opened, had seen the sample being removed, he himself had not done the analysis, the chain of the custody till the point of the expert was not proven, and that probably led to that reasonable doubt. You know that term, reasonable doubt, which acquits a person. I'll give you, when I was doing forensic science, my idea was that forensic science is such a wide topic that you use the term forensic and add it to any other term, it gives you another huge branch of forensic science itself. So for example, if I'm dealing with something called as palynology, it's an unexplored branch of forensics. If I use the word forensic palynology, it creates a new branch altogether. So palynology basically studies the pollen grains which are found. So probably all of you must be knowing this. Palynology, for example, if I've traveled from Konkan region to Mumbai, there's particular pollen grains which can only be found in the Konkan region. So when I come from Konkan to Mumbai, my shoes, if it has certain pollen grains which can only be found in that area, it can show that I was traveling from Konkan to Mumbai. So that is the branch of forensic palynology that proves a person's last, what position or what place he was at. Then there exists forensic odontology, which was recently used in a very famous case of Nirbhaya rape case. It was the first case where odontological evidence of one of the accused was used when his bite marks were taken from the body of the victim, and it was matched with his the denture. and it was matched with it, and ultimately the persons were convicted also on the basis of the odontological forensic evidence. Then comes another branch of forensic, which is the anthropological branch. Anthropology, as you all know, I need not explain what anthropology means, but I'll give you one example of anthropology is. Now, you must have heard of a very recent case of Sheena Bora murder. Sheena Bora murder case was, there was no body found. Only what was found by the investigating authorities was skeletal remains of the victim. So what happened after that is that they collected the skeletal remains. They probably found a skull, and from the skull, they did the facial reconstruction. Unfortunately, the analysis which was done was, is there any problem? I've got certain messages in between. If I'm audible, just kindly say in the chat that it's audible properly for everyone. Also, I would like to mention that the session is of 40 minutes. So when it will end, you can again re-log in. We'll be continuing with the next part of it if something if something remains in the end, and the question answer session will be taken in that second part. So once you get logged out after the session ends, you can re-log in from the same link which has been given to you all. So we were dealing with Sheena Bora case. Yes, I have received that my voice is audible to everyone, so I can continue. Sheena Bora case, the analysis which was done was of facial reconstruction from the skull which was found. The software which was used for the purpose of doing the skull analysis or the facial reconstruction was Phantomorph. So those who know that what Phantomorph software is must be already laughing. But unfortunately, that was the sole basis on which the accused were denied their bail in the initial stages. And now, when it came finally for the stage of cross-examination, it was found that that Phantomorph software is something which is used for the purpose of creating Photoshop images. So even my images and your images, if they are spoofed together, it creates a third image of a person. So that's not something by which you can do the forensic analysis or facial reconstruction of a person. So that completely destroyed the entire evidence. That's why it becomes very important. Now, probably when I gave you these two examples, you must have understood that why it becomes very important for forensic experts to know the understanding of law, that jurisprudence which I was talking about in the beginning. So let's go ahead with what simple principles being forensic experts you all should be aware of. First, we have already referred to it, is the principle of chain of custody. Now, what is chain of custody, you all know, but why it becomes very important is because the principle based on which our entire criminal justice system is based is the principle of proving the guilt of the accused beyond reasonable doubt. So there should not remain even a single doubt when you are proving a particular case. And most of the time, when forensic experts are working from the side of prosecution, your one single wrong analysis can lead to creation of a reasonable doubt and might lead to the acquittal of a person. So why it becomes very important for you all to understand the chain of custody is that today the forensic science is limited to the laboratory analysis. I'm sure that in future, when the mobile forensic labs are already increasing in Maharashtra, also in India, the future of forensic science is also increasing with the analysis on the spot itself. When the experts will go on spot, they themselves will collect the evidence. Unfortunately, today our experts are not being allowed to, they are not actually being taken on the spot. But what is more important is that the future of forensic science, where people will be traveling, the forensic experts will be going on the spot, collecting the evidence. And then it will be your responsibility to understand when you'll collect the sample, when you'll do the analysis of the sample, and when you'll send it to the court, there has to be a clear chain of custody in between. If you lose one part of it, even single small part which gives the reasonable doubt to the accused, there is no point in going ahead with the prosecution case because he will be acquitted. So that's why this principle becomes very important for you all also to understand that the entire case is based on the chain of custody. However, I'm also going to tell you one more interesting fact, which most of the forensic scientists forget, that when you start working as a forensic expert, you're not working only for for the prosecution. What you're actually working for is to prove something. So your job is not to create something which will affect the accused or which will lead into his conviction. Your job is to actually do the analysis of the sample which is being given to you. So you're not working for prosecution, you're not working for the defense, you're working as an individual who will be doing the analysis based on the samples which are there in front of you. Now let's go to the second part. What is more important for you all to know is section 45 of Evidence Act, based on which you yourself are allowed to come in the court of law, where you state or depose something before the judge, who is the person. We read the word court exists, court believes it to exist. So here your role comes, you come before the court. Section 45 of our Indian Evidence Act says it's the expert opinion. Now, why opinion is very important here is because if you'll read the entire Evidence Act, you will nowhere find that a person's opinion has been given this much importance ever. But the only single person whose opinion has been given the weightage of evidence or of a relevant fact under Evidence Act is you all, your expert testimony. Why is it so? Because if you're not an expert, but if you're stating something which you have heard of, it becomes hearsay evidence, which is not evidence at all. However, when you are an expert, your analysis is based on the scientific results which you have brought out of the entire studies which you have done. That's why your opinion gains that weight. That's why it's not just section 45. You have to also read it with section 46. Section 46 also permits you all to give the reasoning of the analysis which you all have done. Now, what is more important is that when you will be doing analysis of something, probably you'll tell the court that a sample, which is probably a fingerprint, is matching with some ABC sample which has been given to me in the lab. That's your analysis. But section 46 permits you to explain all those things what you have done. That reasoning which you have found, the results, what analysis you had done, what tests you had conducted. So when it comes to forensic science fingerprint, you have to explain that the minutiae of that one fingerprint, whatever is found, what pattern it was, whether it was an arch pattern, whether it was some other loop pattern, and how it matched, you are allowed to explain that. So forensic expert's opinion can be backed with the reasoning which he gives. Is there any internet connection problem in between? Okay. Now it becomes very important also for you all. I'm getting certain messages that, okay, yeah. What also becomes very important for you all to understand the authorities based on which you will be studying for the purpose of your forensic. Now you are in the stage of forensic science students, most of you. Why the authorities on your law becomes very important is because when you come in the court of law as an expert, what actually matters is not just your testimony, the way you depose before the court, but also your cross-examination, where the defense advocate is going to ask you such questions which is going to not only challenge the analysis which you have done, but which will be also challenging the credibility of you as an expert. Now, what becomes very important is that you all should know the main authorities on every single subject in which you are an expert. Now, when you say that you are an expert of toxicology, I know that you all are forensic doing BSc and MSc, so you will not be permitted to do a post-mortem analysis. But if someone is an expert into after doing MBBS and MD in forensics, he is permitted to do post-mortems. For you all, toxicology, which is also a part of medical jurisprudence. If you are an expert in the forensic chemistry laboratory doing analysis of toxicological material, or the organs which have been sent to you of a person who has died because of a poison, You all should know that there is an authority by Modi, Jai Singh Modi of Parik, which says the landmark principles on your branch of science. Now, what happens is that when you come in the court of law, you depose something, and that goes contrary to the authority, which is the main authority on your subject. The defense lawyer points it out to you. He says that whatever you have deposed in the court goes contrary to what has been said in the particular book, and that probably creates a doubt on your opinion if you are not able to explain it properly. I'm not saying that that opinion itself on the book matters. Your opinion is obviously the main opinion because you are coming in the court as a witness. But what matters the most is your ability to explain that why something in the given in the book is not applicable in this particular case, and why your analysis should be weighed more than what has been stated in those landmark books on the subject. However, for that, you need to have the complete knowledge of the experts in your field. If you are going to become a forensic fingerprint expert, then you should know that who are the basic, what are the basic books. Galton's book on fingerprint, if you have heard of Francis Galton, his book on fingerprint becomes very important. When you become an expert on firearm or ballistics, Goddard's principle, he has written a book by name A History of Firearm Ammunition. That book has been referred by all the advocates in the court. We give the authority to the judges. We say that, see, Calvin Goddard's principles say these things, and the expert who has come in as an expert in front of the court is saying completely contrary. Judge believes us, we being the lawyers giving some authority on the subject. What matters is that at that time, as an expert, you should be able to explain that why your analysis is different. That's why understanding along with your expert opinion, what is more important is to have the complete analysis, complete knowledge of the main the main books which are available on your subject. Now, one more important thing, which is a very small section under Indian Evidence Act, is the section 159, which allows experts to refresh your memory. So remember that you will be analyzing n number of cases when you will be there in the lab, but when you will be called in the court of law, you probably might have forgotten that what case exactly that was. You as an expert are allowed to refresh your memory. You can look into the case papers, you can look into the analysis which you have done, and you can refresh your own memory, and then you can depose before the court. So your knowledge of that you are the only person who has been completely allowed to look into all the papers of the case becomes very important, because an expert is not an eyewitness. He is an expert who has created his opinion based on the facts which were there in front of him. That's why you're allowed to refer and refresh your own memory. With this, we'll go to a step back. We were there in the court. Let's go one step back. At the stage of investigation, you should know how investigation is carried out. The principles right from when the FIR is lodged in a case where forensic scientist is his evidence is going to be important. Now, is it a case where the accused says that, okay, I have committed the offense and the forensic science will lose its significance? For this point, I'll tell you one interesting case of United States. Have you heard of the case of Oscar Pistorius, and Paralympic, the Olympic medalist? He had shot his girlfriend, and after he shot his girlfriend, after that he was tried with an offense of murder. They call it a murder with first degree homicide. He was tried with that case, and after that he was asked whether you plead guilty. He said that yes, I have killed her, but I have killed her because I was not knowing it was my girlfriend. I thought someone is entering into my house, because I thought someone is some thief has entered into my house. Because of that, I shot my gun into the randomly into the dark, and later on I realized it was my girlfriend. Now, whether in these cases forensic loses its significance completely, what you all need to remember is that here your understanding of investigation comes into picture. Is that though there was no eyewitness in this case, though there was no other expert or any other person or any other neighbor also who has seen it, but what was there in that room was a silent witness called forensic science evidence, which was lying in that room, which was a gun which was found. And it was seen that he had shot that gun not randomly, but only 2 bullets were shot out of his gun. After that, when he confirmed it, 2 later bullets were shot to just make sure that his girlfriend has actually died. So there is a time gap in between. The distance which he claimed was the distance between him and the dark where he had shot, and the distance actually which was there was matched, and it was found that it is not that same distance, and based on that he was convicted. So forensic expert's role goes to that extent where even the accused confesses that he has done something, but if there still remains certain scope for the purpose of analyzing it, whether it was an accidental firing or it was a case of firing with intention, your knowledge, your science with that one single witness who was silently sitting in that room where the offense was committed becomes very important. And that is the forensic science evidence. Other than that, you should know what is inquest. Now, in our criminal procedure code, there's a procedure given for the purpose of inquest. Inquest procedure allows the police to do inquest, as you all know, is the inquiry in the cause of death. So the police officers are allowed to do the inquest, or under 176, the magistrate is also allowed to do inquest in the cause of death. But ultimately, not these persons are experts into finding the cause of death. Now, let me at this stage also tell you one more thing. What you all should know, there are certain principles of law which existed, but there will be certain principles of law which can change with the advancement of science. One simple example is there existed one section under Indian Evidence Act which said that when after a particular marriage, if a child is born, it has to be deemed that the child is belonging to that particular couple, and that created a presumption against it. Now, what science has changed it is that the DNA sampling, when DNA evidence was found, this section lost its significance. Now, let me tell you one more thing which today exists on the law book. Our Supreme Courts have allowed this principle to exist. The principle, it says that a direct evidence should be weighed more than the physical evidence or the forensic evidence. To give you one example, if there is a fingerprint in the room which right now I am in of one person who killed me, and he probably left. No one has seen me, no one has seen him killing me at that point, but someone saw him running outside my room. Now, in this case, a person seeing him running outside my room and a fingerprint which was found inside my room, when it matches to be a same person, the case is where the direct evidence as well as the physical evidence is there. The question comes when there only exists a physical evidence, or when the physical evidence is contrary to the direct evidence. Till today, the courts believed that the direct evidence will always be weighed more than the physical evidence. But I'll give you one example which will prove that how physical evidence and their validity also becomes very important, and how it can be weighed in certain cases, which is the future of forensic science, more than the direct evidence. Let's take example of a person who was stabbed by 3 people. 3 eyewitnesses have also seen him. They say, they deposed in the court that we saw 3 persons, A, B, and C, stabbing the victim. When the post-mortem analysis of the body was done, it was found that he did not die because of stabbing. There, in fact, existed no stab injuries on his body. What actually was there was the death was caused because of throttling. He died because of asphyxia. Now, in these cases, you can clearly say that the witnesses who were there, they were lying, and the physical evidence which was there has to be weighed more than the eyewitnesses. And that's how the principles of forensic science will change. And this reminds you, or this will remind you all of the another principle of forensic science, which you must have read in your first year itself. Facts do not lie. A man may lie, but circumstances do not lie. That's why forensic science in these cases becomes very important. Now let's go ahead with certain other important provisions of law. There are many provisions of law which you all should know. We'll not be dealing with all the provisions. I'm just giving you a head start that this is how your understanding of law should develop. These are certain important provisions which everyone should know, but there are other provisions of law under Information Technology Act, under certain provisions under Evidence Act, which some of you might require to know at some of the point when you will be deposing as an expert, or when you will be doing analysis as an expert in your laboratories. Now I'll tell you certain important to tell you all that why these provisions become very important. Let's take one example of provision under section 65B of Evidence Act, which has been added after information technology was introduced, and we are seeing that information technology is playing a lead role right now in our lives because of the pandemic which we are seeing. So it's definitely going to change our lives in future as well. So Information Technology Act and the provisions which are ancillary and incidental to it, you all should know. So it becomes important for an expert to know that what is the 65B certificate which is required. So if you are a cyber forensic science expert, what is important for you all is to know that I'll give you one example. What happens is that you go on a crime scene, or probably you have been sent a hard disk from the crime scene, cyber crime which has been committed, and you see that disk which was existing, you do the analysis of it, you present it before the court of law, and after that you realize that okay, there existed some integrity differences in between it because the chain of custody was not maintained, because you find it based on the hash value which doesn't match with it. However, let's consider a case in which it in fact matches. You see that the hash value is matching, the hard disk which you have done the analysis of is the same hard disk, you have taken the samples out of it, you have created another clone hard disk which you will be presenting in front of the court of law. Now what matters here is that you had taken the computer, you have done the analysis out of it, but what you did not give was the secondary evidence certificate which was required for you to give, because the analysis was done from your, so for example, right now I'm using a laptop. If I fail to give the details of the laptop from which I have done the analysis, that loses the entire significance of whatever analysis you have done. 65B certificate under Indian Evidence Act is the certificate which is required for every single person who is doing the analysis on his computer to be furnished in the court of law when he says that I have done the analysis of XYZ hard disk from my particular computer. What happens actually, which is very unfortunate, is that the 65B certificates, being a mandate of law, have been created by police officers, and when an expert comes in the court, he's been just made to sign on it. He tenders it to the court of law, and they say that there exists 65B certificate. When we defense lawyers get up, we ask him that who has given you this 65B certificate? Has it been created by you? Experts say that it has been given to me by the police experts. Now, for you to understand that this 65B certificate, what I'm repeating again and again, is something which is a person who is doing analysis has to say that my computer was working at that point of time. I have done the analysis from my own computer, which was working from last several days. I did the analysis. I created the samples. At that time, the computer was in a perfect state or perfect condition. And that has to be your own certificate on which you yourself have to sign, being an expert. And then you have to tender it at the time when you give your secondary electronic evidence in the court of law. If you don't do it, the entire integrity of that cyber analysis, whatever you might have done, completely loses. Your NCASE analysis, your forensic toolkit, whatever you might have found, that will completely lose its significance unless you follow the legal procedures which are required under the law. Now, lastly, we'll go to the point of depositions in the court of law by an expert. What becomes very important for you all is to know that there are three ways in which your examination can go on. First is that if you are being called from one party, mostly a prosecution, you are examined by the prosecutor in chief examination, where you have to say all the facts of your cases. After that, when you're cross-examined by the opposite party, which might be, if you are being called by the prosecution, you will be cross-examined by the defense side. They'll ask you certain questions on the point, whatever you have done, what analysis you have done, or like I said, that what authorities were there on the subject, why you are not aware of these things, what analysis you have done, why there is an inconsistency in between it. Or if you have opened the sample, like I said, why it is not you who has opened it and why it has been opened by your peon. These questions will be asked to you and you will not be allowed to explain anything. You'll have to answer in yes or no at that point of time. And then the third analysis is that after cross-examination, if the prosecutor will feel that you have to be again re-examined on the spot, he will re-examine you. That is the re-examination in the case. So as an expert, when you go in the court, it should not be something which is very new to you all, that what procedure is going on. You all should know that how our depositions in the court work. It's not the way, because most of the time what happens is that there's something called as CSI effect. CSI effect is a crime scene investigation was a series in United States, and majority of the judges and the juries used to watch that series and used to create their opinions based on that. Unfortunately, my observation in India is that that effect is more influential on the experts itself. So experts see the movies, experts see certain series which are going on, they create their opinions based on what series they have seen, and they forget that how actually the court systems work. So therefore, I also give you one more advice, is that being an expert, or right now being a forensic student, you are understanding that you should go in the court of law, you should see how the proceedings go on. If you are interning with some forensic expert, which I was doing in my BSc, when you will go with these experts, when they are deposing, they are going to depose in the court of law, that time you will realize that how trials work, how depositions are to be made. On a lighter note, I'll give you one story for the purpose of when before we end. I'll tell you one story, is that it's not always the experts who are wrong. It might be the defense advocate might ask you certain random questions, because of which you might feel that, okay, I was knowing everything, but when he started asking me these questions, I probably lost the link in between. So there's a very famous joke which is being told, is that once a forensic expert came in the court of law, he did a postmortem analysis, and a brain was lying on the table when he did the postmortem analysis, and the cause of death was told by him to the court of law. When the cross examiner, the defense advocate, got up, he furiously asked that, did you check his EEG? The expert said, no, because he was dead at that time. So I did not. He asked him, did you check his ECG? Then he said that, no, I haven't checked his ECG as well. Then said, did you check his pulse? Did you check his whether he was breathing at that point of time? Expert said that, no, I have not done it. Then he looked at the judge with a smirk on his face. He said that, what is he saying? What analysis he has done if he has not if he has not even found out whether EEG, ECG, or his breath, his breathing was working at that point of time or not? The expert said that till today I was of the opinion that a person without a brain cannot live, but by looking at you, I can be very sure that there can be an existing person without a brain. So on a lighter note, don't try this in the court of law, but you should know that the questions which have been asked to you by the defense lawyers are not always scientifically correct. That's why it's your role to explain it. You need to show that what facts existed, what analysis you have done, and you are completely allowed under our laws for the purpose of explaining the analysis which you have conducted. So on this note, I will end with the first part of it. I guess we have some time to end this session also. So I'll start with the second small part of it, that career in law after forensic science. Now, myself, when I was interning at that time, when I was doing forensic science, I saw how legal system works, and I was of the opinion that I should go into the legal system. And many of you, I am of the opinion, that are also interested into going into law, as I have been told by the organizers also. So how forensic helps you when you become a lawyer is that you get to know the understanding of everything. And mind you, as I have told you, that forensic science is not something which is just useful for prosecution. There will be a time in future when everyone will know that forensic science is the best tool for the purpose of understanding the correctness, or as we called in the beginning, the what exactly is the truth. So for the purpose of eliciting the truth, the role of forensic science will become very important in future. So in that case, when you become a lawyer, you understand what is the knowledge, what is the understanding of forensic science is. You can apply it perfectly to your case. Some might feel that it's only limited to criminal law, but it's so wide. Criminal law is not something which only deals with forensic science. There are other branches of law as well. If you're dealing with civil law, where the question is of wills, who has signed the will, handwriting expert's role will come in between. If you're dealing with any other company law, fraud, in which the company is calling something into question, your cyber audits will come into picture. If you're dealing with any other case in which auditing is required, forensic audits become very important. So your understanding of all these branch of forensic science can help you in any branch of law which you go into. Now, how you will do law, because organizers wanted to me also to shed some light on important colleges where you can do your law. Law is a branch where you, again, like forensic science, you study every single aspect of life. Law is a similar thing where you need to find something which is existing, and your country's basic structure is based on laws. So for that purpose, I would suggest that while if you decide to do law, it's always important to do it from the best institution to understand the importance of law, what law is. For that purpose, we have in India common law entrance test, which is for the purpose of 5-year course, which is a course which is offered for law students after 12th standard. Since most of you have already completed your BSc and MSc, it's not a bar that you can't give a 5-year course, you can't do that course, but it becomes after 3 years or after your 5 years after MSU, it becomes very difficult for you to do again 5-year course in law. So there is a 3-year course. 3-year course in Maharashtra, we have a common entrance test, CET, for that purpose. And after giving CET, if you score the higher marks, like the way in which engineering and NEET exams goes, similarly, you have been allotted the colleges based on your marks. You can join the best colleges, which mostly are the one in Mumbai, which is Government Law College. The one in Pune is the ILS Law College. You can, in fact, give certain entrance exams of the private colleges. Symbiosis Law College, I've seen recently, Symbiosis has opened its college in Nagpur as well. So they have their entrance by name Symbiosis entrance test set. So if you give their entrance test, you can get enrolled into Symbiosis law schools. Other than that, if you're willing to do laws from 5-year law course, you can give the CLAT, the common law admission test. You can get enrolled in the top national law universities. National law universities are like IITs of law. So for the 5-year law course, unfortunately, they don't offer 3-year law courses. But if you get enrolled into the national law institutes, there you will be trained into law with the most prestige. These are the most prestigious institutions which will, for 5 years, you will learn the law. And when you will come out, you will have several options. So after graduating, you will have, after completing law, you'll be having options to go into corporate fields where you'll be working with probably a bank, probably a firm as a legal advisor. You can join litigation firms which might brief the councils, or you can join directly the field of litigation where the criminal law also comes. Criminal lawyer, civil lawyer, corporate lawyer, where you practice in the courts, you practice in the tribunals. So this is how your journey after law goes ahead with. I guess we have some time left, so we'll start with question answer sessions. So I'll unmute all. It's just that I request everyone to ask questions one by one. Anyone has any question? Okay, I've put everyone on mute because there was a disturbance. So if anyone has any doubt, you can unmute yourself and ask me a question. I hope I have made it very clear that how law is important for forensic experts, and how after forensics you will be doing law and what will be the importance of it. So if you have any doubts, you can either ask me in the chat box or you can unmute yourself and ask your question. I guess if there are no questions, then we can end this session. Okay, I'll wait for 2 minutes. I'm getting one question. Can we pursue law through Open University? Unfortunately, there's no LLB course which is being made available from any Open University. And even if you do it, it is not having any value in the Bar Council exam. So when if you want to become a lawyer after you complete your law, then Bar Council does not recognizes any LLB degree which has been done from Open University. So you have to do it from a law course. But there are certain colleges which do not require compulsory attendance. So from those colleges, you can complete your law course. What is the difference between 3-year and 5-year? There is Toshika is asking this question. 3-year law course is basically designed for the purpose of students who have completed their graduation, like you all, those who have completed forensic or any other degree, and there's those who want to pursue law after that. So that for them, 3-year law course is there. 5-year law course is for the students who are going to do it after 12th standard immediately. So that's the only difference between both the law courses. However, it is said that the 5-year law course has first 2 years where you are trained on the basics of law. 3-year law course you don't get those first 2 years where you are trained on the basics of law. You're directly introduced to the branches of law, several laws which you are directly exposed to. That's the difference between both of them. Okay, I'm getting one more question. I'm getting one interesting question that if a man is seen going towards a building at 4 p.m. and a crime is committed at 4:15 and there's no eyewitness to it, whether a statement of the lady who saw that person going inside will be made admissible to the extent that she saw a person entering in the building, because she is an eyewitness only to this fact that the man entered the building. To that fact, it will become very important. To that extent, it can be made admissible. So there's one section under Indian Evidence Act which says something which is in the special knowledge of a person. So if you prove from the side of prosecution that there is a lady who has seen a man entering in the particular building, the burden will go on the accused person to say that what he was doing in that building. That was something which is in his special knowledge. So what about career in forensic science in foreign? Which country should be chosen? Okay, I'll tell you based on the friends, because I myself have not pursued any career in forensic science after in foreign country. But I'll tell you there are few friends who have done it. In UK, something which is very similar, because they also have a common law system. There, the forensic science and its aid to the court of law is quite similar. So you can search for the institutes which offer forensic science in United Kingdom. Obviously, you have a choice to do it from United States also, but unfortunately, their legal system is very different. So if you're planning to come back, then that will not be of help. But if you're planning to stay in United States itself after completing your forensic science, that will be of some help to you. Are there any more questions? Okay, I'm getting one more question that it's not quite clear. It says that importance of law. Can you repeat this question? I'm getting this from some number from some Galaxy, some phone. Can you just repeat the question? It's probably unclear. But you all also should know that something which is further important is that the understanding of the law and the way you explain these things in the court. So to that extent, when the question is, I guess that was the question which was quite unclear. I'm getting one more question. Can you again explain how direct evidence should be weighed more than physical evidence because of the... Okay. So I had given one example when I was explaining this, is that usually the principle of law settled by our Supreme Court also says that direct evidence has to be weighed more than physical evidence. But I was explaining that in future, when forensic science will develop, physical evidence in certain cases will be given more weightage than direct evidence. So I gave one example at that point of time, which stated that a person who was, the eyewitnesses said that he was stabbed, but in the post-mortem report it was found that he died because of asphyxia. It becomes very clear that the direct witnesses or the eyewitnesses were lying, because the cause of death itself was not stab injury. In fact, there were no stab injuries at all. The cause of death was asphyxia. So in these cases, the court will obviously discard the testimony of the direct witnesses. The court will rely more upon the testimony of the expert or the forensic evidence which has come, because of the principle facts do not lie. Is there any more question? Okay, I guess so. That's it for today. Bhupesh is there. Shall we end the session? Okay, I guess so that I guess we should end the session today. What is the admission procedure in ILS Pune? You have to give the CET exam. Based on your score, it's probably the second college after JLC in Mumbai. The second college usually in the merit list is ILS Law College Pune. So based on your marks in your CET examination, you are given admission in ILS. If you are aiming for the top colleges in Maharashtra as well, you should start reading for the CET exam. CET exam has a pattern of general knowledge, legal reasoning, general reasoning, and the basic understanding of law, which will include constitutional laws, your basic understanding of constitution, basic understanding of Indian Penal Code. So if you're preparing for your CET exams or also for CLAT exams, you need to have basic knowledge of these subjects. So I guess that's it. Thank you so much. I should thank Bhupesh and the entire university for the purpose of organizing this session. I also like to thank all of the participants. Thank you so much. So I'll end the session here. Thank you.